This is GDC Podcast, episode 4. Hey everybody, this is your host Chris Graft. I'm editor-in-chief of Gamasutra. I'm here with my co-host Alyssa McAloon.
Hello, I'm Alyssa. I'm news editor and associate publisher at Gamasutra.
Yeah, how you feeling today?
Sick. Great. Thanks for asking.
You're feeling a little sick.
I learned a lesson about don't fly with a head cold.
Oh yeah, you just came from South Dakota, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The hotbed of the game industry, as they call it.
We have Dakota State, which is a game design college, so they're great. I graduated from there.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, good job. So today we do have a guest. He is kind of hanging out in the back right now. You know what? I'm not even going to avoid spoiling. It's Brandon Sheffield.
It's me.
The lead writer on Lab Zero's Indivisible, but we're not going to acknowledge him yet. We're going to put Brandon in a corner for now. But real quick, let's go over some GDC 2020 news, some real quick announcements. We got to mention that registration is still open. It's still open. It hasn't closed yet. So if you would like to go, you should go to the website, gdconf.com, sort that out. It's from March 16th through the 20th. There's something else that is cool that happened. The GDC narrative wall is up. Alyssa, what exactly was that again?
It was a project they hosted at GDC 2019 where they solicited contributions from developers in attendance and built that into 3 neat little twine projects that are now up and playable.
Yeah, and that can be found at narrativewall.gdconf.com. And lastly, this is freshly baked news, fresh out of the oven. Newly announced Game Funding and Investment Summit at GDC 2020. And that'll be a place where you can learn about how to partner with people and who have money to give you. And also people who want to give you money, they can go over there and find out how to be a wiser investor. So if you're interested in, supporting your studio or your project with cash money, which I think that, some people might be, check it out. Game Funding and Investment Summit at GDC 2020. All right, I think, what do you think, Alyssa? Should we just cut to the chase?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the suspense, I don't think I can take it anymore. So, our next guest, former editor-in-chief of Game Developer Magazine, sibling publication of Gamasutra before its unfortunate demise, contributor on Gamasutra. Sorry, that's kind of bleak. Game Developer Magazine was, it was the best game development magazine.
It was pretty good.
That ever existed. So he also a contributor on Gamasutra, founder of the indie studio Necrosoft Games, which is responsible for great games like Gun House and Oh Deer. That's DEER. It is a racing game where you run over a deer.
Or
Fake
not.
deer.
You can choose not to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I always played running over. He also worked on the highly successful releases, the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, SNK 40th Anniversary, and an upcoming Samurai Showdown, what? Is it like 50th anniversary?
So you just got to keep ramping it up.
Yeah, ramping it up. The older the franchise of fighting games, the better for Brandon. Frequent GDC speaker and a really great advocate for students and who want to enter the game industry and develop careers in the game game industry. And kind of the main reason he's here now is he was the lead writer on Lab Zero's Indivisible, which came out in October this year. Great game that we'll find out more about. And here we go. Let's welcome Brandon Sheffield. Hey, Brandon.
It's me.
Yeah, it is you. So you are the lead writer on Indivisible, or were. It's out now, so your work is mostly done, right?
Mostly done is what I should say. Yeah, it's mostly done.
Can you tell us, for listeners who aren't familiar, what is Indivisible, and what exactly did you do on the game?
Yeah, Indivisible is it's a platforming action Metroidvania-ish game with a kind of fighting game inspired battle system. We did kind of make the mistake of calling it an action RPG, and it sort of misses a lot of the core elements of an RPG, like a lot of stats and leveling and equips and stuff. But it does still have that kind of vibe, which is why we said it. But it's more like a weird Metroidvania action turn-based fighting game.
Yeah, that's a lot easier to remember.
Yeah, it's much easier to remember that way.
Yeah, and it's got this. I really like. We can talk. I mean, I know you didn't work directly on the battle system, but I like how it's just so fast-paced, and it does have that kind of that immediacy, like a fighting game might. Which makes sense because Lab Zero worked on Skullgirls, right?
That's right. They did Skullgirls before, and the battle system was very much Mike Z's baby. Mike Z being the I guess the gameplay lead on Skullgirls, and he's also the creator of the engine that this whole game is made in. Yeah, I'm terrible at the Indivisible battle system, but other people are good at it.
Yeah, well, that's good. And but it's made by Mike Zed, as he's known in the rest of the world.
Mike Zed.
Yeah. So the lead character is Ajna. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you did the dialogue, which also would mean that you did a lot of the character creation and development. And this Ajna is such a strong character. You can tell that she had a strong vision behind her. Can you talk about how you began to lay the foundation for her as a character?
It's an interesting one. It's kind of a long meandering story, and she was less established than you might think. I guess I forgot to mention exactly what I did on the game, and
let's do that.
I basically did all the writing that, aside from the backer NPCs, because it was like the highest ever game on Indiegogo. Mm-hmm. And so it had a lot of backers that put their own NPC dialogue in there. So I did basically the dialogue, but the story beats were already established when I came in. There was a big outline, and it was all tied to specific gameplay stuff. So it was an interesting challenge that we can talk about later, to have to essentially write around existing story beats to try to get the results that we wanted. And that's kind of, in a way, the story of Ajna's development as well, because she was originally created by the team, and they had a vision for her. They had she went through a lot of visual iterations, but by the time I came on, I knew what she looked like. So I had that. And when I came on, there was an existing script, mm-hmm. which I rewrote. Well, actually, rewrote is not exactly the right word.
Just slip that in there, which I rewrote.
I just started over is what I did. Yeah. And one of the challenges that the team had with Ajna was that, because as she goes along, she has to undergo some things that aren't fantastic, and she has to make some choices that are not great and the player might not make. So it was really important that she be likable, and that was the big issue before I came on, was that she wasn't a likable character.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I read a blog post that you wrote that focused a lot on the importance of making this particular character likable. So what was the difference between the unlikable version versus the honestly completely likable version that ended up in the final game?
I would say what started out as like angsty teen, which was a little more of like a coming of age kind of thing, I opted to go toward a couple things. One is humor, and which I have a kind of complicated view of. Maybe it's not complicated, but I have a specific view of, is what I should say.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other thing was like, so Meryl Cartwright, who's the creative director and was also the story lead, she was like, Ajna can be dumb. She can be stupid, and that's okay. And so I really took that forward and made her not stupid, but like incredibly straightforward. Just like she sees a goal and she goes toward it, regardless of whether she knows what that goal is or how to get there or whatever. She's just like, here we go. And I think that doing that allowed me to have a lot of fun with her without making fun of her, because she's just like, she's got that kind of tenacity of character that lets you build a lot of things around her, I guess.
It's also she has a certain kindness to her, even if she is, she is kind of naive, but she's also optimistic and she is kind.
Yeah, there were kind of a couple of anime that I actually took cues from. One is Azumanga Daioh, where there's a character called Tomo who is very energetic and always smacking people, and there's a particular scene in that anime that was kind of an inspiration for Ajna. There's a bit where everybody, it's a bunch of schoolgirls, and they're going on a class trip. Well, not a class trip. They're going on a trip to someone's summer home, and Tomo, when they arrive after this long, arduous journey, grabs the keys and throws them into the grass. Because she's like, wouldn't it be funny if someone grabbed the keys and threw them into the grass? And everyone's like, no. And then she said, yes, it would, and she throws it. And then everybody has to spend like the next 30 minutes looking for the keys so that they can get into the house. When they finally get them again, she's like, wouldn't it be funny if someone did it again? And so that scene was kind of partially an inspiration for Ajna. And another is one called The Promised Neverland.
No. I'm familiar with that.
Oh yeah, Alyssa, I was waiting for Alyssa to pop in here, but yeah, go ahead.
I love The Promised Neverland. Sorry.
No, I do. It's really good, but also. Oof.
Yeah, well, it's none of the spooky bits that are inspiring here. It's just the main female character in that. She, no matter what, wants to save everybody all the time. She's everyone around her is like, let's compromise. We gotta do what makes the most sense to save as many people as possible. And she's like, no, we're saving everyone. Even if it kills me, we're saving everyone. And that's another part that I got and kind of slotted into Ajna's character.
Yeah. So not only is this lead character a young woman, but also the whole game is inspired by the mythology of Southeast Asia. So of course, you have to be mindful of, writing for a young woman, but, also for a different, something inspired by a different culture that you want to make sure that you still, are accurate and respectful towards. How did you go about doing that?
Well, a lot of the work was done already in terms of that stuff because the mythology was set up by a very multicultural team. So there was already a lot of thought and concern put into that. And then for myself, to make sure that I didn't kind of mess anything up too bad, I did a lot of research. Like in the early part of the game, you have to find this thing called the Campharia Galanga, which is also known as Resurrection Lily, in order to recruit this character. And so I did a bunch of searching to see what plants were used in kind of traditional medicine in any of the regions that we were covering that also vaguely looked like the plant that we had. Mm-hmm. And that was the one that I found that pretty much fit all those things. And so anytime there was something where we needed to have or an opportunity to have a cultural touch point, I would try to do some research and find something that would meet that.
Yeah. Hey, hello. Alyssa. How's your cold?
I'm just spacing out over here a little bit, but no, it's really good conversation. I'm having that interviewer's dilemma where when the person you're talking to is saying really interesting things, I forget to turn my question brain on. I'm just like, yeah, no, that is really interesting.
Yeah, but the anime stuff, it sounded like you wanted to say something.
Oh, no, it's just that Promised Neverland is an emotional journey. And Emma's fantastic, the character he was talking about, and I could see a lot of that reflected in the very little I've seen of Indivisible. I haven't got to play it yet. I'm so behind on games, but
that's okay.
I've played every single game.
True gamer, Chris Craft.
Promised Neverland is an interesting one for me as a story exercise. I'm actually trying to not exactly emulate, but I'm trying to draw from it for the next game that I'm writing too, because it has a great like cat and mouse tension between the various parties that are involved in the mystery that's unfolding. And one really cool thing that I learned from it is that a great way to do mystery in a visual medium like this is to show all these various sides that are competing. You show their individual internal dialogues and their stories within themselves. So like one faction is discussing their plans, and then another faction is discussing their plans. So you as a viewer know more than either one of those factions knows. But at the same time, both of those factions are hiding something both from you and from each other. So, as a viewer, you feel like you have more information than everybody in the show does, and that allows you to kind of speculate about what's going to happen and try to think about how these threads could interweave. But since the characters are also hiding from something from you, there's a lot of potential for mystery and setups of complicated scenarios and things. And I think it's really cool. So I like that anime.
And Indivisible, if people haven't played it, like there is, all of these things, there's so many things that are internalized inside of Ajna. The whole, the premise of the game is that she recruits people and they live in her brain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, she absorbs everybody that she meets into her brain, and a lot of the dumb jokes that I make in it are like, I don't really like direct fourth wall breaking because I think that's kind of weird and silly, but I like having the characters be aware of how ridiculous a situation is within the framing of their universe. So having one particular character, Razmi, often commenting on how Ajna is just essentially abducting people into her brain felt appropriate to me because I would think that it was weird. So surely somebody else would as well.
Yeah, and that avoids, the winking, into the camera type thing.
Which you don't want.
What's your process for like writing humorous dialogue? Because it's so easy to like write a line and be like, oh, this is the funniest thing in the world, and then it just like falls flat. So like, how do you go from like idea inception to actually what ends up in the game?
So what I tend to do is look at what I've got, be it images of characters or various scenarios that have to happen, and then I just start writing something and see if something interesting happens. It's my kind of... I had a background in writing kind of webcomics for a while, and that actually really helped me find my comedic voice, I guess, and how to write dialogue between characters that sounded like humans were involved with it. And so it's kind of a similar process where I'll start from an image or an idea and then build it out from there. And sometimes, I wind up writing myself into a corner and the whole thing is just terrible and I hate it. And so then I'll scrap it and rewrite it from scratch. But once you've got a few decent jokes in there, you can recycle them with restraint as the game moves along, and that actually, like, people love callbacks and stuff, so for the people that pay attention, that's really handy. But you can also sometimes some of the like blocks of text that I will scrap are ones where I'm recycling too much and I wind up feeling like I'm trying to make everything a joke, and those winds up being just terrible.
Yeah, that's my life. I try to make everything a joke. I just did it now. So like, I think we really established that you and I have known each other for a pretty long time.
Yeah,
we're good friends. So I'm playing. By the way, this is total. What is it? Collusion, and it's happening right now, so be aware, everybody. No, but I'm playing Indivisible, and within the first 5 minutes of gameplay, and I'm encountering NPCs, the dialogue, I mean, they read like text, like from you, like,
yes,
as far as like the personality is there. I mean, I'm pretty sure that if I was playing Indivisible, I'd be able to be like, wait, and I didn't know, that you were working on the game. I would be like, wait, did Brandon
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
I did a short talk at GDC, like, I don't know how many years ago, 8 years ago or something like that, which was about how you should make games for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe that if you make something that really resonates with you, then, and showing a perspective, then people will actually like that much more and find it more interesting and more engaging than if you do something that's generic and for everybody. Mm-hmm. So, obviously this game is made by a lot of people, and all the gorgeous art and music and everything is by a whole group of folks, but the writing was something that was kind of my part that I got to own. And so I was able to just be like, this is my joke.
Yeah.
You could just this is my style of joke that has been in my brain for some time, and so now here, you may have it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really was kind of like I was writing jokes to my friends. And I think the important part of that is, like, say I'm making a dumb joke to you or any other person that I've known for a long time, I assume that you will get it. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like I need to explain it to you or whatever. And I think that having a trust in the audience to get your joke is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like, we're referring to these as jokes, but they're not things, they're not like jokes. It's just humorous. So, for example, really early on in the game, you run into a guy with a bunch of sticks, and then he's just like, I like to carry a bunch of sticks. I like to build stuff with it. I like to set it on fire. And I like to slap people with them. And something like that. That's not the exact... I'm not looking at the game right now. It's not a direct quote. But it's just kind of... there's that kind of like, oh, that's like... that's silly, type thing. And it's just... And that kind of humor plays out through, so much of the game that it really... it makes it feel like lilty. There's still some heavy things that happen in the game. But there are these... really... micro scenario instances where you get to meet one of the very many NPCs in this game, and you just their personality right away. Which let's talk about that, because there's a whole lot of characters in this game, and how do you write for all those, keep track of them, give them their own unique personalities?
Well, I can't say that I did the greatest job of that, but I did sort of try. With like that sticks guy, I think the
sticks guy.
One way to get people on board with your character is to just kind of have their first sentence almost describe who they are completely, and that guy, the first thing he says when you click on him is, "Ah, yes, bale of sticks." And of course the reason that came about is they just showed me NPCs that I needed to write for, and I was like, well, this guy's carrying sticks. What if he loves it? What if that's his whole deal? And it makes it a lot.
How much of that? Sorry to interrupt, but how much of that is just you as somebody who's on deadline writing on a project, just like, I can't think of anything else. He's got sticks. Let's do something with sticks.
Well, yeah, there's definitely some of that. There's a there's a character in one of the other regions, Connell, that has. They sent me this character, and he's looking down into this white bowl, and I was like, it just looks like he's staring at milk, and so I made him a milk fortune teller who reads the milk to tell you what is gonna happen. And it's just like so stupid, but it is the very first thing that I thought of.
I like that though.
Yeah, and I find that when I'm under pressure and I have to think of the absolute simplest or first thing that I think of and do it, a lot of my better work comes from that. Just like a gut reaction, gotta do something, this. And then
unless you probably can't.
I've never done that in my entire life.
Yeah, it's like that's just how writers and reporters and just in general operate. I feel like. Yeah,
we love pressure. I mean, we must. So, in terms of writing all these various characters, it was tough because there are something like, I should really know the real answer, but there's something like 34 voiced characters in this video game, and
we'll fact check that. Yeah.
And you don't have, this is only a minor spoiler, but you don't have access to all of them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that made it a real challenge, because there's a lot of, up until the very end, we were still deciding who, with some characters, like when you could even get them. Mm-hmm. And so they couldn't be part of the main scenario. So I had to essentially pare the main scenario down to only the characters I knew you could get. And even then, there are still like 8 of them, which is too many to put into any one conversation. So I had to limit conversations to 4 at the absolute max. 3 would be a better number, and obviously 2 is much easier. But since we had so many characters, I had to keep inserting them, into conversations so you'd remember that they existed, or so that they could have some sort of an arc and all that kind of stuff. And we wound up having to relegate some of the side characters. Their whole arc only takes place during their recruit and loyalty quests that they have, because there just wasn't a lot of space to put them otherwise, which
I'd imagine
is regrettable.
I'd say
But-
working with a voice acting like deadline too, it just added like a whole bunch more pressure on top of what's already a very time sensitive process.
Oh yes, because of voice acting, I actually had to be creative-wise. I had to be finished first, because we had to, record everything and implement it in the game, and all of that takes a lot of time. And so, I had to. Maybe I wasn't the very first, but I had to finish up while other folks were still working away on designing stuff and implementing cutscenes and all that sort of thing. So it made me really nervous, because there's no going back from voice acting. There's no return point, because unless you can get people back in the studio, which is expensive and thus not going to happen, you're stuck with the dialogue that you've got. And so if anything changes, then you have to find creative ways to work around that.
Yeah, that sounds scary.
Yeah, it's a little spooky.
Earlier you mentioned you were basically handed, all the story beats. And on top of that, also we didn't mention, like, this is an Indiegogo funded game. It's a $2 million Indiegogo funded game. So it was big. So a lot of the backers on there, what did they offer? It was like their own dialogue, or
they had their own dialogue and their own character. The rule that I made, because I didn't edit the NPC dialogue for the backer characters. Someone else did that. But the rule that I set was that backers could not write the main characters, or any of the core any of the playable characters, or even our NPCs. They could only do monologues for themselves. And then somebody edited those all together and had to deal with all that stuff, and then they just got put all over the place. And so if you want to see a chubby merman or a furry cat girl or whatever, they're in there.
And as far as the story beats go, what was that like, where it's like, okay, this is what's going to happen, now you finish it up?
Yeah, it was interesting, because there were definitely things that I would have liked to change, but was unable to. And it's been interesting to see the results of those changes, or not the changes, the results, how people react to those scenes. Like, for example, we had a huge is the wrong word, long is the correct word, long argument about, this is not really a spoiler either, because it happens in the first 10-15 minutes, but there's a character called Dar who kills Ajna's father.
Yep.
And he winds up being the first person that you recruit into your brain. And I was against that. I was like, can we at least have him not be the direct killer of the father? Maybe it's under his orders or something like that, but not have him be the one who actively killed him, because it makes it so difficult for him and Ajna to be together in the same space. And everyone was very adamant that he should in fact do this. So you wind up with this tension of Ajna carrying around her father's killer in her brain and being her only companion for the first portion of the game. And so that, like, everyone thought that it was important for later events for that to be true. And so I tried to write around it as best I could. And so reading reactions to that part have been very interesting, because some people are like, Ajna took no time to grieve, this makes no sense, and they didn't like it. And then other people are like, this throws the traditional RPG narrative on its head and is a good example of how this story seems like it's going to go down one lane of tropes, but in fact goes another way. So it's been interesting to read that both of us were kind of correct.
Yeah. I mean, how does that make you? I mean, it doesn't like. What were your thoughts when you're reading all these?
Oh, reading the comments?
Yeah, the comments.
I would say that the majority of people's complaints, I was like, yeah, I get that. There were only a few where I was like, that's not quite right. But I think the ones where I didn't agree totally were the ones where they were where they didn't decouple writing and story, which I wouldn't really expect people to, but a lot of people actually did. They were like, I love the characters, but I don't love this aspect of the story, or something like that. But ultimately, I was really happy with the results, because most people did love the whole story, it seems, and we made a bunch of people cry, which is good.
It's always good.
That's what you want.
That's proof now. This is the answer. Can video games make you cry? And here we are.
Yep, we did it.
Yeah.
And it's definitely nice to read that the game made people laugh a lot, and then also made them cry, and they got to feel several ranges of emotion going on in the one game. So overall, I'm pretty happy with reading the reviews. I didn't really like hearing Zero Punctuation's review. That one was kind of not so cool, but otherwise,
I somehow missed it.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
he's very snarky about a lot of things that are like fair enough, but kind of out of any one individual person's control, and thus difficult to feel like those comments should be as biting as they were.
I guess on that note, how does like reading reviews for something you put your heart and soul and your time into has to be like horrifying? Would be my personal word for it, but there's some value, like how you're explaining it, in reading what other people have to think and like criticism of the thing that you made. How do you kind of like go about getting the useful information from reviews, or kind of knowing when to be like, no, I can't let this get to me, that takes completely wrong?
Yeah, I think I've found that somehow, perhaps due to a long time of being a journalist and just being very online and such, I seem to have a slightly thicker skin when it comes to reading these kinds of things, because if I feel like I did a pretty good job, that's my defense against everything else. And there'll be people that say that they hate it, and that won't stop me reading the review or the commentary, because I'll be curious to see what they have to say about, like, if they say they hate the writing, I'll keep reading the rest to see if they really liked something else. And I'll often find that someone didn't like the writing, but they were kept playing through the game because they liked the battle system, or they compared the platforming to Celeste, or they thought that the game was too pretty to stop playing, or something like that. And then I can share that back with the team and have them, I don't know, feel a little nice about it. So that's valuable in itself. And another thing is, it's worth sifting through a lot of these just general comments, because for example, I found someone on the internet who on Twitter who was making fan art of Ajna and Torani, who's kind of like her mentor character that shows up later. And Torani she's sort of modeled after a Thai deity. So I found a word that an older Thai woman could give affectionately to a younger Thai woman, and found this word luk sao, which is basically like my child. And this person that I found on Twitter that was doing this fan art was a Thai person and was really focusing on the use of that word and writing it in Thai along with the images that they were drawing. And it was great because it felt like that person, I mean, I wonder how many times that person had gotten to see a Thai term of endearment in an English language video game before, and they were also validating for me that the term was used correctly, because I'm always nervous when I look up something from any culture that's not my own and then try to put it into a video game in correct context. And so, it was worth sifting through tons of good, bad, mediocre tweets to find something like that where it's like, this totally resonated with somebody, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, get that connection. And it's good that the word didn't end up being like jerk face or something.
Yeah, I mean, I got it from Thai friends, so I had a reasonable amount of confidence that it was fine. But you never know.
And of course, like there is the underlying concept here of all the benefits of having an inclusive team when you're writing a story, not just like this, but any kind of story. You just get more interesting characters and like more viewpoints on different ways that people live. So.
Yeah, and I had some trepidation around being a Caucasian dude who's writing the story. I mean, writing all the dialogue, for this very diverse cast. Mm-hmm. But, I realized that having a diverse team behind you, not behind me, but with me.
Good save.
Mike Z thinks I'm too arrogant. So anyway, having this group of people that not only were responsible for crafting the story and the characters visually and story beat wise in the first place, but having them look at everything I wrote and veto stuff if it seems like it's wrong, or just add a bit of themselves if they can or need to or want to somewhere. I didn't do as much of adding of themselves as I could have because of time pressure, but there was some of that, and it that all just kind of made it so much easier to make a game that has a lot of inclusivity, a lot of different kinds of people, without making it like a big deal or a big point. Mm-hmm. I read an article that someone wrote recently about how they were happy that all these characters were hanging out together and allowed to just be there. They didn't have to be like, you're this race and I'm this race. We got to figure out how to work together.
Yeah.
Everybody was just like, hey, it's a new friend, or I don't like that person. And that didn't follow down any particular lines. And it's unfortunate that that's rare, but I guess it is rare. And I'm happy we were able to get somewhere with that.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, when you and I first met, we were like, you're white, I'm half Filipino. And
right. That's how it went down.
Personal interaction already failed that test. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, we need to wrap up here. Brandon was only supposed to be on for 5 minutes, but it just got really interesting. One thing, as I mentioned earlier, you really do a lot to give young people, the information and that they need to, get into the game industry or navigate through the game industry. You do that, through projects at GDC and and just in general. But for writers who are trying to get into the industry, what's Brandon Sheffield's tip for that?
Yeah, so I actually recently did a little talk at a group called Gameheads in Oakland, which is all about kind of youth of color breaking into the game industry and stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, number one tip is, of course, do writing. Do a bunch of writing and get critiques and try to do better and realize that you can always do better. And like, this isn't exactly game specific either, but I also think it's super important for people to figure out what their own taste is and write things based on that. I remember in high school I got invited to some like writers forum or something like that, and I decided this was going to be a good time to challenge myself and write like a sci-fi story that was out of my comfort zone, and it totally fell flat. And what I learned from that experience was not that I shouldn't have written a sci-fi story or something, but that I shouldn't have tried to write so far beyond my feelings and my experience. And whenever you can, not that people shouldn't branch out, because they obviously should, but if you are going to branch out, you need to ground it in stuff that you know super well first. So you can take the germ of something mundane and very familiar to you, and which might be familiar to other people, like the particular ritual that you have for getting cereal in the morning or something like that. And then we pan out from this cereal thing to we're in a hellscape or whatever. That it helps to ground the experience and helps people to identify with it. And I find that that's a mistake that a lot of young writers make, is they try to go straight for the fantasy bit without doing the here's how this relates to my life and this is why it came from me as a person rather than anyone else. Then in terms of game stuff, people should make Twine games, I think. That's good. Because Twine's free and it's really easy to use, and you can make visual novels with choices and things. Another tip that I have is, if you write dialogue, try to read it out loud and see if it sounds extra stupid, because that happens to me a lot. I'll write something and I'll be like, is this fine? And then I'll try to read it out loud or read it in my head, and I'll be like, yeah, this is not something a human being would say.
How loudly do you recommend reading it out loud?
Just the top of your lungs is probably...
Okay, good. I'm doing it right.
Yeah, just get on public transit and just scream it out. But yeah, also just write for any game that you can. My first video game that I did any writing for was, oddly enough, a Capcom collection with Digital Eclipse back in 2005. In Digital Eclipse's first iteration, and I was just writing some dumb quiz questions for there's this Capcom game called Quiz and Dragons, which had a bunch of quiz questions in it that were about Capcom, and they wanted to renew those, and so I wrote some new Capcom trivia. And that of course didn't do very much for me career-wise, because I was definitely a footnote in that video game, and very little of it had to do with me. But when I next then went to someone who needed a writer, I knew they needed a writer, I was like, hire me, because I can write things, and also I have 1 game credit, and then you can see it. And so having
for a little company called Capcom.
That's right. So having any game credit can can really help. It is fun that, now I guess I've been doing writing in games for almost 15 years now, and I can finally claim to have a million seller, and that's Street Fighter 30th anniversary, and it is like there's absolutely no way that sold 1 million copies because of me, but I can still put it on my
you don't
resume.
have to tell people that though,
and that's what matters.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. So we'll wrap it up here then. Indivisible, Lab Zero. It's Brandon Sheffield, lead writer on the game. Highly recommend it. Not just because he's my friend, but it really is good. It does convey so many emotions. The battle system is so much fun, and check it out. And thanks a lot for joining us, Brandon.
Thank you. It was enjoyable.
Good.
That's what we aim for.
What a weird way to say that.
Would a human being say that?
I don't think they would.
All right, we're back for a little bit. This is where we reflect on our guests. Or reflect about them.
Talk about them behind their back.
This is where, Brandon's gone now.
Gossip.
This is where we talk crap. So I got some juicy information on Brandon Sheffield now that he's gone. The man has 20 game consoles connected to his television set.
I'm trying to imagine, like all at once, like that's.
Yes, all at once.
I don't know. I'm like staring at my TV in the background right now, and just like you can see the cords hanging from behind the shelves, and just this nightmare that if like a cat got back there, they'd be stuck forever. Like, I can't imagine 20.
Yeah, I'm looking at my entertainment system that has one PlayStation 4 connected to it and one Apple TV, and it just looks like a rat's nest. So he must have some kind of system that makes that possible.
Get him back on the podcast just to talk about cord management.
Yeah, we'll get him back on for that, for the GDC podcast. We need to have, GDC should have a cord management summit. I think that would be well attended. No, but Brandon, we didn't even get to talk about it. He's a multifaceted person, but he collects games, and he collects old hardware and things like that. So it's there. He knows that stuff. That is an area of interest and expertise and intrigue. Yeah. Well, what did you think about the conversation we had with Brandon?
It was really good. Like I said, I kept kind of like, it's mostly the cold brain, but I kept kind of like just zoning out and listening. Like I was just listening to a very good podcast conversation and forgetting to contribute, but it was a really good.
Yeah, this wasn't just a live stream like for you.
Yeah, no, I just come into these. They're my own exclusive little interviews I can listen to and not contribute to. But I always like when we end up either on here, the couple times I've been on the GDC Twitch channel, and we're talking to like writers and stuff like that, because I try to poke in. I'm like, okay, but how do you write good? How do you make words great? And every time it's just like, oh yeah, I just do, and it just kind of works out like that. But that was kind of the case here too, where I tried to like dig in, like how does humor work? How do you make jokes funny? And just he explained his process. But like the thing that's not being said there is these are people with 20, 15 years in like experience in that. It's just like a practice skill over and over and over again. Like he was saying with just getting your first like game credits, but like all of that kind of builds into experience that gives you the ability to just kind of like not overthink your jokes and just look at like the art you're given and be like, oh, this is a stick guy, this is the milk guy, and just kind of like make that a funny, productive thought. And that's kind of like a secret expertise that I would pick up on.
Just get it done. I mean, writers and journalists, not just those professions, but anyone. I don't know. There's a certain kind of person that can only do anything on a deadline. Yeah. And I'm kind of that way too. And I'm sure that every single person that I have worked with in journalism or writing or whatever, they're the same way.
I don't want to say when we're recording this podcast, but
oh man. This is case in point.
My other takeaway that I want to sneak in is anime is good and everyone should watch it.
Yeah, and apparently, you watch enough anime, then you'll get a video game credit somewhere.
No, it was interesting for people should go watch The Promised Neverland. It's on Crunchyroll, which is an anime viewing subscription. It's like Netflix of anime. But the things he was saying about characters in there kind of changed. Like, I hadn't thought that deeply into it because I was just consuming my media. But the way he was describing how certain characters are very driven, and the conflict for the entire series is set up at the beginning, and then it's these smaller micro internal conflicts that create the suspense. And like, I don't know, I'm really interested to see what game that manifests into, because just how he was describing it was like really great. So
yeah, that's something that, where this just sounds like an interesting. I haven't seen it, but I haven't seen a lot of anime. Those Transformers, count one, yeah. But that's such an interesting way to create suspense without hiding everything. It's like, we're going to show you everything, and we'll be able to draw the suspense from there, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, just like very like character driven turns where everything feels there's like mystery novels you'll read where you'll get to the end and you'll guess who the killer is, and it's like, actually it's this guy because of this thing that was kind of obscured for you, and you don't feel justified in it. But the kind of turns he was talking about are those where you don't see it coming, but it still feels justified and like it fits into the overall narrative.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for joining the Chris and Alyssa anime.
I will review anime on this podcast if you let me. Do not. Please do not.
Yeah, we can do that. We'll add a segment. Anime with Alyssa. Sponsored by Subway. No, we have no sponsorship with Subway.
A little Game Awards joke for you.
Yeah, we're very timely.
What were your big takeaways from the conversation now that I've blabbed on?
Oh, no. Oh, you're not blabbing. It's I don't know. A lot of the stuff that Brandon, talks about are conversations that I've had with him about writing. And I think with him, I love the advice that he had at the end about finding your voice, and not I could tell that he was trying to walk a line between write what and also writing, like branching out into new topics, and just to be careful about that. But it's just an interesting thing that I think that you can only figure out. You can watch YouTube videos, you can watch, that talk about process. You can watch Brandon's, talk, on GDC Vault or GDC YouTube. But the only way that you're going to be able to figure that out is like writing. And I know that probably is really annoying whenever any young writer asks for advice, and the advice is just write more. But that really is what it is. You just have to keep on trying. And I do think that there is a point where it, clicks or becomes more clear to you about the style, like your writing style. Like, if I'm sitting around and, trying to write like Philip K. Dick or Ray Bradbury, it's not going to go so well for me. And in fact hasn't gone well for me. But that's kind of the thing. I really like that idea of just kind of like figuring out, what you like. And I also liked, when talking about writing the dialogue for Indivisible, it's kind of, that same idea, like, writing, don't write necessarily for other people. Obviously you're writing for other people, but do something that, write something that you enjoy, something that you enjoy. There's going to be somebody else out there that it connects with. So there is a lot of stuff there, and it's kind of nice to talk to somebody that about their craft, because usually we're just making dumb jokes. But yeah, it's great. So I think that that about does it for this one. You need to get loaded up on NyQuil or something.
It's
Dayquil.
it's ear pressure, so Benadryl is what I have to do, but I can't function as a human being after taking that. So it's got to be like suffer through the workday and then just go to sleep.
All right. Yeah, or you could just take it off. Take it off. Take the afternoon off.
I don't know about that.
All right. Well, we'll figure that out later on. And thanks everybody for listening. You can subscribe to us. You can follow us on Spotify. Rate us if you love us. And you can also find us on GDC YouTube if you
Spotify, the Apple podcast thing, and then what's the Android one? Is it just Google Play, right?
Yeah, Google Play Music, even though it's not music. But yeah, you'll find us. I trust all of you. All right. All right. This is Chris Graft.
Melissa McAloon.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.